Hello, clown cars and clamshells. My name is TB Skine, and let's take another look at one of the community collaboration comics that Riot Games have been publishing over the last year or so. If you remember, I did a video a couple of days ago complaining substantially about the ways in which they have published these comics, or rather the ways that they have not really published these comics. They are relatively unknown amongst the League of Legends community, as far as I can tell, and they are published in a format that makes them very hard to find and kind of difficult to browse. I complained about that for a long time, but I decided that after all that complaining, I should attempt to do my part to fix some of the issues. So with whatever exposure I can give them with my 21,000 subscribers, I've been doing videos talking about these comics in depth, giving them a proper review and a proper critical appraisal as much as I can give it. And today I'm quite excited because we're going to be doing Crystal Quest by ARTeapot. And I don't know if it's art combined with teapot as a portmanteau, so exactly how you pronounce that, I'm not sure. Crystal Quest is a comic based on the fantasy heroes skin lines, like the D&D skins that a bunch of the various heroes in League of Legends has, including Sejuani Dawn Chaser being the main character, essentially, of this little series of comics. And it follows a relatively simple fantasy plot where Lysandra the Ice Queen is threatening the Freljord with eternal winter, and King Tryndamere sends Sejuani out on a quest to find a magical relic that can help stop her. That's the very basics. And along the way, of course, she runs into, trusty travel companions, and there's a twist in the third act, and, a dramatic finish, and a setup for, what might come later, a little cliffhanger teaser at the end. And it's a very standard fantasy narrative, which is pretty much exactly what that skin line calls for. I have to be honest, though, I don't care that much about the plot, because I am so in love with the artwork. I mean, I really... This art style, this very sketchy, kind of traditional looking art style, I believe it's still digital art, as far as I can tell from the colors and stuff. It's still digital art, but whatever brushes the artist is using, they're gorgeous. I love this very simplistic, very almost storybook-like style, like a children's book telling of some grand fantasy adventure, like a fairy tale, or indeed a little bit like a medieval manuscript, which we're going to get into in a moment. But if you've been paying attention to this page, you might already see what I mean when I reference medieval manuscripts. So I recommend you go and read the comic for yourself to get, the full story and read everything that's going on. So for the purposes of this review, mostly we're going to be talking about the thing as a structural whole. We're going to be talking a little bit about the characters. We're going to be talking a little bit about specific scenes and how I feel that they might be improved, or stuff that I really, really love about them. Now, one thing that's easy to love about this comic is all the little background nods and references. Here, for instance, Talia is just casually strolling by in the background as she bumps into Twisted Fate here. You can kind of tell that it's him because of the way the colors are used, which is a nice little touch. I love that Vi and Caitlyn just kind of show up, and they have, like, the artist has invented fantasy skins for them as well. You can see these little background paintings with Poppy and Mario jumping around with a hammer here in the background. It's so very good. You have Camille running around here as well, alongside a wizard skin for Heimerdinger, which I really, really would like them to make in the actual game. And you can see Bard here. Bard is performing on the street, making absolutely no money from anybody. And he's singing or playing the tragic love story, the Romeo and Juliet love story of Katarina and Garen. And it's so many nice little touches. Here's Ezreal running along in the background. And it's worth blowing this comic up to full size to just take a look at the background and take a look at all the little details that are put in the background. There's also something interesting going on with the media that's being used here. Because, well, like I say, it's a digital comic, as far as I can tell anyway. It's a digital comic. It's not actually traditional media, but if you take a look at this looks almost like it's been brushed with... not charcoal, I'm looking for another word. Crayon, essentially. It has a crayon-like aesthetic to it. that persists through a lot of it. And then sometimes, for instance, the Cloak of Twisted Fate here, you've got an aesthetic that's a little bit more like markers, Copic markers, if you're familiar with art markers, and pens. And then when it comes to taking a look at here, the scene that Bard is playing, the aesthetic shifts again, and now it's colored like watercolor, which gives us this lovely washed out feeling, which is how the artist identifies that this is the story world of what Bard is playing, by using this washed out dreamlike aesthetic. And that's, again, very standard touch, but what I love about it is that, like, there was an active switching of media. We transitioned into watercolor aesthetic from this much more sort of crayon-like aesthetic in order to delineate that change. Another little thing, and there's a little bit of trouble with the website where page 5, unfortunately, does not have a full-size version, which is a bit of a bother. So we have to do this to look at page 5. Here we have Lee Sin sitting around. I don't know who that lady is, but I want her in the game. And Graves with his massive shotgun turning up as well. Let's see, where the heck was I? There was a thing I wanted. Yes, right. The twist in the third act is that Karthus, of course, is an evil lich who betrays them at the very last moment. And take a look at what the ice powers kind of do to this panel where we see Lysandra corrupting Karthus. And by the way in which, like, Lysandra threatens to blanket the Freljord with ice, and then she corrupts Karthus with black ice, turning him from, you know, a good person into this. All of this mirrors the Hans Christian Andersen fairy tale of the Snow Queen, which was also the fairy tale that they used as the basis for making Disney's Frozen. Although Disney's Frozen has very honestly very little to do with the original fairy tale, this actually mirrors Hans Christian Andersen's fairy tale somewhat closer than Frozen actually does. But anyway, the reason I bring up Karthus is take a look at how, like, most of the story, he's represented as just this generic, handsome wizard dude person. But as he transitions, first there's this, now as we can see him becoming more corpse-like, but this, I just love what's being done here, because there's an intentional, I'm looking for a specific word, they're intentionally drawing him kind of badly. And by badly, I don't mean that it looks bad, but that you can see here, it's all very sketchy. It's as though they've kind of been manically scribbling with a crayon to get the mouth and the eyes right, and then they're putting a bunch of lighting effects on top of that. But in general, once Karthus transforms, he becomes this much more scribbly, much less defined, whereas his old form was very well defined. It had all these well-defined features, and it's sort of generally very clearly rendered. Once he transforms, it does this, it turns him in, and that makes him, in a literal visual sense, more ghost-like, right? Which is what he is. He's a lich, he's an undead. So it makes him more ghost-like by making him less distinct, which is a very clever little visual move, I have to say. And in general, just the expressiveness of this artwork, just, it freaking gets me. Look at this. It's so wonderfully expressive, and it does this with rather limited tools, I have to say, because when your eyes are drawn like little dots and you just have some eyebrows, it can really limit what you can do with expression, because a lot of what you do with expression, I just ate, so my voice is having a little trouble, comes down to what you can do with the eyes. And when the eyes are so simple, there's a limit to what you can do in terms of raising and lowering the eyelids or changing the way that the cheeks and the eyes interact. So making characters that are clearly expressive, even with, you know, that particular art style, it's a lot harder than it looks. And also, for example, here, look at Jace's face in this panel. We can see clearly that he's looking at Leona, but the reason we can see it is because the artist has tilted his eyes a little bit and tilted them towards her, which, again, is because you don't really have actual eyes in which to move the pupil around. You have to find different solutions, and it's simple stuff, but it works so very well. And by the way, this page in particular, this little montage, look at River Spirit Nami over here. I mean, just look at that. Just look at that. And look at the clever way. You can see these little dark streaks running up and down, simulating the shadows or the feeling of, you know, wavy water at the same time as it shows the presence of seaweed, or I guess river weeds at the bottom of the river where Nami lives. And it's just little visual touches that are so clever in terms of building the scene to make it clear that we're dealing with an underwater scene here. It's just so very nice. This one might be a little bit weaker because it's clearly supposed to be an arena fight between Leona and Jason. That's where I might have maybe zoomed out a little bit more to show more of the crowd scene so you could get a better sense of the environment. Because here, in Ivern's Forest and Nami's River, and indeed in Lysandra's tomb, where Karthus finds this eye crystal, whatever the heck it is, just the colors and just the general feeling of the environment does all the environment building for you. But here, when we're dealing with architecture, it might have been useful to pull out a little bit more. Anyway, I could just gush forever about how good the art style is in this goddamn... Like, just the colors, the use of colors. Look at this. Look at just the feather on Bard's hat. Look at how many... You got the oranges, and you got the dark oranges and transitions into purples and pinks, like bright pink. This artist can use bright pink in the middle of a page right here for Karthus' staff, and it's not distracting. That's really hard because like bright neon pink like that draws the eye instantly. But because the rest of the style is so colorful and so bright, it works. It's just I love the art style, and I just adore it. It's just fantastic. And I could talk forever about it, but instead let's talk about something that is perhaps a little bit more subtle and difficult to notice, but that's these side panels. Now, if you look, every single page rather, has this little side panel here. And in this, it echoes medieval manuscripts, where oftentimes in the margins, in the sides, the monks would literally doodle. Like, a lot of the times, a lot of the drawings you see in the margins of medieval manuscripts are just the monks doodling shit, because they're bored, and making a manuscript takes a long time. But sometimes it also becomes part of the artistic process and part of telling the story of the main manuscript. And this is something that speaks in medieval manuscripts to the craftsmanship and the amount of time it took to make, as each manuscript back then was an art piece, essentially. It was incredibly expensive to have made. The reason I bring that up is because here, see how a narrative unfolds. From page to page to page to page, a narrative tells us some of the backstory of what's going on. And it's a lot easier to see, and again, the browsing for comics on this particular website, I have my issues with it. You can check out my video for those. But here, there's a couple of special pages where all these side panels are put side by side, and you can see it presents a whole narrative of its own. A narrative that tells the backstory of the comic that we are reading. Everything was fine. We had fruit and vegetables and stuff, and Queen Ash was cool with it. Oh no, winter is coming. Wait a minute, winter is this evil bitch who turns up, and Ash has to fight her. Ash plainly loses, gets turned into ice. By the way, again, we are looking at a retelling of Hans Christian Andersen's The Snow Queen. And we can see here Lysandra snapping Ash's arrow and Tryndamere crying over his frozen wife. And then Tryndamere has to fight ice giant Olaf, as far as I can tell. Kicks the shit out of him because he's Tryndamere. But Ash is still frozen, which kind of sucks. So Tryndamere gives the quest to Sejuani that she must go and find the cure for eternal winter. And then there's this last panel with Anivia sleeping, which is not explained in the main narrative of the comic as yet. So I think that serves as a little bit of a teaser for what's to come. Anyway, I wanted to bring that up because that is incredibly fucking clever. One of the issues I have with this comic is the same issue that I had with the Olaf comic that we took a look at yesterday. It is dense, in the sense that there's a whole lot of stuff that they have to get through, and they only have so many pages to do it. In this case, it is 14 pages that they've got to do it. Of those 14 pages, the first 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 pages, more or less, 7 actually, are dedicated just to Sejuani finding the other companion characters that will be accompanying her on her adventure, and then the rest of the pages are there for the actual adventure, Karthus' betrayal, and Jace fighting him and getting buried under some rubble, but maybe he's probably okay. Right? And again, that's just the issue when you have these comics that are kind of commissioned as one-shots. Like, I don't know what kind of deals the artists have with Riot. Like, how many issues of Crystal Quest have been commissioned, I don't know. But it feels to me, reading all of the comics that Riot have put out as community collaborations, that each one is kind of, we're going to publish it, we're going to see how people respond, and then if they respond well, we're going to do a second one. And when that's the format you're working within, as an artist, as a writer, you kind of get, oh, but I have all this stuff I want to tell. I have all this story that I want to get through. And again, like with Olaf, where I said I would maybe dedicate a lot more space and time to each individual fight in his narrative, here, I would have dedicated the full scope of Season 1 just to the meeting the characters, establishing that they're going to help her on her quest, maybe spend a little bit more time telling the backstory to Sejuani's quest, because there's not much of that. And that's where I think these side panels are such a stroke of genius, because you have this incredibly limited space to tell the story. So instead of telling, like, spending 4 pages telling the backstory to why Sejuani is out on this quest, which would eat into your already limited space, use these side panels to tell a whole self-contained narrative, just explaining the broad outlines of why is Sejuani on her quest, who put her on her quest, and maybe she's looking for Anivia, who knows, like, and what is she out to do? That is just, from a storytelling perspective, that's mind-blowingly clever. And again, because there aren't that many pages to tell the story in, again, it becomes a little condensed. You have to do some interpretation in order to figure out what the hell it means. But it's so clever, and I'm so in love with it. And I'm so in love with the art style on this thing, and I want all of you to go and read it. All of you. Because it's so good. Let's see, I could nitpick some stuff, like the sound effect. You can see the this sound effect right here. The lettering is not super interesting in this comic. And lettering is kind of an important part of how you communicate sound in comics. Like here, that's what this is supposed to communicate, and it does an okay job of it. Like, you get the sense that yeah, stuff is rumbling, things are falling down. But between fonts and hand lettering, there's a lot of stuff you can do that makes word art like this stand out more and emphasize the scene more. Like, but that's, as you can tell, that's a nitpick. Like, that is complete and utter nitpicking. There's also a little weakness in the art style, in the sense that here Sejuani is very angry and she's grieving for the loss of her friend, but the art style has a limit to just how much, like, how intense an expression, how intense an emotion it can let her express within the confines of the art style. Which, if you want to tell a very serious story, that can be a bit of a problem. But since this is clearly meant to be pretty freaking lighthearted, not so much of an issue. Do I have anything else to say? No, just go read it. There's a link down in the description. You should go read it. You should follow the artist on Twitter, because the whole and Twitter and Tumblr are going to put links to that, because holy crap, they're good at what they do. And they, like, when they make a piece of work like this and they get to publish it for one of the biggest game companies in the world, they should get a lot of attention out of that. Just, all of you who see this, go and do that. Go and do that. Look how pretty the things they draw are. Go look at that, because it's good. Anyway, my name's been TBSky. I'm rambling. If you have any comments, leave them down below. If you have anything else you'd like me to take a look at once I'm done taking a look at these comics, feel free to suggest that as well. Tomorrow, Punches and Plants is going to be the next comic we're going to be looking at. My name's been TBSky, and thank you very much for watching. Have a good one.